Welcome, friends of the greasy shop rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 562XP chainsaw. The customer dropped it out of a tree. You can see that there's a big hole in the fuel tank here, and the handle's all busted up. We're pretty sure the rest of it's in decent shape, but we'll take a look at it as we go along. First thing I'm going to do is pull the starter off. We'll take a look. It doesn't appear to be damaged at all, but what I really want to see is a closer look at this piece of framework right here. On these newer style saws, when they drop them, that thinner piece of chassis there, it tends to break. This one's in good shape though, so we're going to keep moving forward. There's two screws on the bottom of the handle that go into the fuel tank. We'll pull those out. We're going to get our bar and chain out of the way right now. Don't forget to release the brake before you try and pull the side cover off. Now there's three screws on this side that hold the handle in. The top one goes to an anti-vibe mount and into the cylinder. And the bottom two here are just screwed into the plastic fuel tank. We got all our screws, all 5 of our screws out of the handle now. It's loose and it could come off. I just didn't do that yet. So you just saw me remove the throttle cable wire from the carburetor, and now I'm pulling it out of the holder that the cable is in. Here we're going to unhook the fuel tank vent hose and now the air filter. This line right here goes to the purge bulb, and it's the return line from the purge bulb back to the tank. There's some clips on the back of the air filter holder that it snaps into, so you can pop it free from those clips. That line will have to come out. And you saw I got sick of that handle rattling around in there, so I finally removed it. Now the front chain catcher, that screw goes through the front anti-vibe mount spring, so that came off. And now our preformed fuel lines, one's a return, the other one's a tank vent. Those came out. This last fuel line I pulled out is the feed line to the filter, or from the filter. And underneath there we still have the throttle cable.
Come on.
So don't just yank the tank out of there. Make sure you I guess it doesn't matter. The new assembly came with a throttle cable, but you got an extra throttle cable now, right? If you don't wreck it. Now it's a matter of transferring the parts over to the new tank assembly. First the front anti-vibe mount, then some other cushions. The orientation of the plastic block on the back of these anti-vibe mounts matters. So make sure you compare them to the old one before you thread the new ones in. That plastic block lines up in the case half in a certain orientation. If you don't do it right, you're going to have a weird preload on the anti-vibe spring. Now because this saw is like new, we're going to save everything like the fuel filter. There's nothing wrong with that. These fuel lines, like this main one here, they just pop out. There's a press fit in there, so it's no big deal. They're all preformed. Be careful with them. You don't want to have to replace it. You don't have to spend the money on a new one if you don't need it. So that was our main fuel line. Now we have our tank vent and our fuel return line. They're preformed lines again. You'll see that the tank vent came out of the old tank, so we got to get that out of the way. And the new tank came with a vent. And the fuel return line just gets pressed into the tank. Just like that. So we've got all our parts transferred over. Now, you got to feed them 3 lines and that cable up into the bottom of the saw. It's not that big a deal, but make sure you put them all in the right holes. Same ones that they came out of. And like this line here, it will have a spot where it seats into that plate underneath the carburetor. So you'll have to get it oriented right and then snap it into place. Now, everyone's going to have their own way of doing this. Here I'm pulling the cable and the lines all through the bottom. Some guys might put the anti-vibe mount in that's on the starter side above the fuel cap and get that all locked into place, but I found that this just isn't going to fall apart on me, and I tend to work certain areas and then move on. So here we're pushing the tank vent on. There's just a fitting that it goes to. Snap it in place. Here's the fuel return line. We're going to get that pushed on the back of the primer bulb. And once it's on the back of the purge bulb, we're going to snap it into some clips that are on that air filter holder. Front chain catcher, that screw goes into an anti-vibe mount. Locks the front of our tank to the case half. And our handle, it did not seem to get bent when the saw dropped. There was nothing tweaked or no pressure released when I pulled the screws out. That's how you can usually tell if a handle is bent. You go to take the screws out and the whole saw twists or tweaks back to shape. And again, I like working one side before I move over to the next side. So I had everything done on the right side of the saw. And now we flip it over and we're getting what we can on this side of the saw. Which means these 2 screws on the bottom of the handle, which are usually the short ones. Don't put long screws in the bottom there. You'll see that if you do put a long screw in, it's going to push all the way up to the point where if you flex the saw enough, the end of the screw is going to touch the bottom of the case. And eventually it could work its way right through there and put a hole in an oil tank. So here's the final anti-vibe screw. And again, this could have gone on like immediately after installing the tank just to hold it in place, but it seemed to work for me. We're going to put our air filter back on. There's one more piece that has to go on here. I didn't order a new one, and it's the little gray piece of plastic that goes alongside the handle there. This one is deformed a little bit, but the plastic's pretty thin. We can kind of bend it back into shape and transfer it over. Now I do spend a little bit of time here making sure this is on right, because I mean realistically, that hand is always in that position on the saw, so you don't want it to feel weird. If it was leaving a gap or something was sticking up there, I would definitely replace that piece. Once it's on there, we'll do a little function check and make sure that our fast idle feature works and the throttle feels good. So that's all I'm going to have for you on the 562XP fuel tank swap. Thanks for watching. Later.